It was supposed to be a short drive, just a way to clear my head after a long day of feeling like I didn't quite belong in my own life. Work was a mess. I'd ghosted my friends for the third time that week. I was restless in my own skin. I didn't have a destination. I never really do on nights like that. I just drove. The sky was dark and cloudless, the highway almost completely empty, except for the occasional pair of headlights in the distance. I had the windows cracked open, the radio low, and my hoodie sleeves pushed up to my elbows, even though the night air was cold. I was maybe 10 minutes outside town when I saw the red and blue flash behind me. My stomach dropped. That quiet jolt of panic hit before I could even think about whether I'd done anything wrong. I wasn't speeding. I hadn't swerved. But the light stayed behind me. I pulled over. My heart thudded in my chest as I watched the cruiser pull up behind me, headlights bathing the interior of my car in an unforgiving glow. I rolled down my window, already fumbling for my license and registration. The door opened behind me. Footsteps crunched on the gravel shoulder. Then I saw him. He stepped into view slowly, tall and broad-shouldered in a dark uniform that looked almost too fitted. His hat was pulled low, and I couldn't quite make out his face until he was close enough to lean into my window. "Evening," he said, his voice calm, smooth. "License and registration, please." "Sure, yeah," I said, handing it over. I tried to steady my breathing, act normal. Did I do something wrong? He studied me for a second, his eyes flicking down to my hands, then back up to my face. "You were drifting a little, seemed distracted." I swallowed. "Just driving. Long day." He nodded once, eyes still locked on mine. "Step out of the vehicle for me." There was something about the way he said it. No edge in his tone, but no option either. I hesitated just long enough for the pause to feel like a choice. Then I opened the door and stepped out. The air was colder than I expected. I stood beside the car, not sure what to do with my hands. He moved around the front of the car, stopping a few feet away. "Hands on the hood," he said. I froze for a second, then obeyed. The metal was cold under my palms. I heard him step closer. Felt it. "I'm going to search you," he said, quieter now. "Standard procedure." My heart was beating too fast. I wasn't sure if it was nerves, confusion, or something else. His hands landed on my shoulders, firm, steady. They moved down, slowly, deliberately. Too slowly. His touch wasn't rough. It wasn't official either, not anymore. When he got to my waist, his hand paused. Then it moved lower, and I didn't stop him. I should have said something. Should have asked what he was doing, or at least pretended I didn't notice how long his hands lingered. But I didn't. I stayed there, palms flat on the cold hood of my car, trying not to shiver, even though it had nothing to do with the weather anymore. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just kept his hands on me. Then he stepped in a little closer. Too close. His chest nearly brushed my back, and I felt the warmth of him, a contrast to the night air. I caught a whiff of his cologne. Subtle, clean, with just enough spice to make me feel like this wasn't just some guy doing his job. "This isn't exactly standard," I finally said, my voice low. "No," he murmured. "It's not." His fingers brushed the edge of my hoodie, then slipped lower. Not groping, not aggressive, just testing. Like he was waiting to see what I'd do. I didn't move. "Why'd you really pull me over?" I asked. He was silent at first. Then, "You looked like you needed someone to stop you." That caught me off guard. I turned my head, just enough to glance back at him. He looked younger now, somehow, still sharp-edged, but something about his eyes had changed. They weren't hard anymore, more curious, maybe a little reckless. "I've seen you around," he added. "Downtown. The cafe on 3rd. My mind raced. He'd noticed me? "That little coffee shop near my apartment? What? You've been watching me?" "Not like that," he said quickly. "I just recognized you tonight. Something made me stop. I don't know." He was close enough now that I could feel his breath at the side of my neck. I turned around slowly to face him, leaning back against the hood. We were eye to eye now, barely a foot apart. The flashing cruiser lights behind him had stopped, casting the whole road in quiet darkness. "You sure you're not the one who looks distracted now?" I asked. His mouth twitched. Not a full smile, but the beginning of one. "You okay with this?" he asked, voice rougher now. There was something almost vulnerable behind the badge, something unspoken. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I leaned in slightly, just enough to close the distance. His hand landed lightly on my side, still testing, still asking, without words. I didn't flinch. I didn't step away. That was answer enough. The air between us got tight, like neither of us knew how far this could go, but we both knew we weren't about to stop. I could feel the heat of his palm through the fabric of my hoodie, resting low on my side, thumb grazing slow over the hem. My breath caught a little, he noticed. His eyes searched mine for a beat longer, and then he leaned in. His lips brushed against mine. Not quite a kiss, not yet, but enough to send a jolt through my entire body. It was tentative, barely there, like he was still giving me a chance to pull away. I didn't. He pressed in more firmly this time, slow but certain, his fingers tightening just slightly at my waist. I kissed him back, and it was clumsy at first, surreal. I had one hand still braced on the hood, the other gripping the edge of the car like I needed to ground myself. A cop. I was kissing a cop on the side of a dark highway at midnight. The thought alone should have sobered me, made me push him away, but it didn't. It just made everything feel sharper, more electric. He pulled back after a moment, barely, his lips hovering over mine. "You still good?" "Yeah," I breathed. "Yeah, I am." He looked at me for a second longer, like he couldn't quite believe what he was doing. Then he stepped back just enough to let the air cool between us again. I saw his jaw flex. He was trying to keep it together. "Back seat," he said softly, voice tighter now. "What?" "You don't have to," he added quickly, "but if you want to." I looked at him for a long second. There was no pressure in his tone. No orders, just an invitation. I nodded once. He walked around to the passenger door and opened it, then climbed into the back of his own cruiser. I followed, my legs suddenly heavier than they should have been. The second I got in and closed the door behind me, it was like a switch flipped. The cab was dark and quiet, the windows fogged slightly from the temperature difference. The space was cramped, the kind that forces you close even if you don't mean to be. But I meant to be. He sat angled toward me, knees brushing mine, one hand on his thigh, the other resting just behind my shoulder on the seat. He looked unsure again for just a second, like he was trying to decide what kind of man he was in this moment. So I leaned in first. The kiss this time wasn't tentative, it was hungry. Our mouths found each other fast, teeth clashing a little at first, hands fumbling in the dark. I felt his grip slide to the back of my neck, pulling me closer, and I let my hand roam across his chest, feeling the tension under his uniform. The radio on the dash crackled faintly, but neither of us cared. We weren't thinking about rules anymore. The partition glass between the front and back seats gave us just enough privacy and just enough danger. His breath was hot, his lips rougher now, tasting like something unspoken and long denied. His hat had come off somewhere between kisses, and his short, dark hair was slightly damp at the temples. I let my fingers trail over the collar of his uniform, then down his chest, where the fabric was smooth and stiff, his badge pressed cool against my knuckles. He didn't stop me. If anything, he leaned into the contact, his jaw clenching as he exhaled through his nose, sharp and low. "You're really not supposed to be back here," he murmured, almost against my mouth. "Then maybe you shouldn't have invited me." That got the ghost of a grin out of him, the first real smile I'd seen. He kissed me again, slower this time, more deliberate. His hand moved down, resting on my thigh, still careful, still testing boundaries, but there was heat in his touch now, confidence. "You always drive around like that?" he asked, voice husky as he pulled back slightly. "Like what?" looking like you need someone to pull you over. I chuckled, but my voice was shaky. You pulled me over. Damn right I did. His thumb brushed over my knee in a slow circle, eyes watching me in the dark cab like he was trying to memorize every reaction. He leaned in again, but this time it wasn't a kiss. He pressed his forehead lightly to mine, like he needed to feel me, to be grounded. I shouldn't be doing this, he said under his breath. Then why are you? Because I haven't stopped thinking about you since the first time I saw you, he admitted. In that stupid denim jacket. Sitting alone with your earbuds in, like the whole world could fall apart, and you wouldn't even notice. That made something in my chest twist. You've seen me more than once? He nodded slowly. Every Tuesday morning. I just never said anything. Didn't know how. I didn't either. Until now. I reached up and touched the side of his face, fingers tracing the edge of his stubble. This is insane. Yeah, he said, eyes closed. But I'm still here. And so was I. I leaned in again, and this time, he pulled me into his lap, my knees straddling him awkwardly in the cramped space, our bodies pressed together in a way that erased all the distance we'd pretended to keep. Everything felt heavier in the cruiser. The air, the silence, the way our hands explored each other like we'd been waiting for this moment a little too long. Outside, the world stayed still. Inside, everything changed. The back seat was tight, our knees bumping the door, limbs tangled awkwardly but neither of us caring. I could feel the tension rolling off him in waves, equal parts restraint and hunger. He held me like he wasn't sure if this was a dream, if I'd disappear if he moved too fast. You're shaking, he whispered, breath grazing my neck. I hadn't even noticed, but yeah, I was. Not from fear, just adrenaline. Heat, the surreal feeling of straddling a cop, in uniform, in the back of his own cruiser under a dark sky. You okay? He asked, eyes scanning my face. I nodded, breath shallow. Yeah, just didn't think my night drive would end like this. Me neither. His hands slid under my hoodie, rough palms skating over my sides, stopping just beneath my ribs. He wasn't rushing it. He seemed more caught up in the fact that he was allowed to touch me at all. The way his thumbs rubbed gentle circles over my skin, it felt less like lust and more like confirmation, like he'd wanted this for longer than he was willing to admit. I don't usually, he started, but stopped. Yeah, I said. Me neither. I leaned in and kissed him again. Slower. Deeper. The kind of kiss that feels like telling a secret. He responded with a low hum in his throat, his hands sliding higher until his arms wrapped around my back, holding me to him. And for a long, breathless minute, we just stayed like that, mouths moving lazily, bodies pressed close, heat building between us in a rhythm too natural to be new. I felt him shift underneath me, his hips rolling instinctively, grinding up just enough to make me gasp against his lips. That seemed to snap something in him. He pulled back, eyes heavy and dark, hands gripping my waist now with purpose. This okay? He asked, voice rough, low. I nodded again. Yeah, more than okay. His hands moved faster this time, tugging at the hem of my hoodie, pulling it up. I raised my arms and let him strip it off, the sudden chill in the air, only making his hands feel warmer as they came back to explore my chest, fingers brushing down the center of my stomach. I reached for the buttons on his shirt, working them open one by one. The fabric parted to reveal skin, warm and smooth beneath. He watched me as I touched him, eyes tracking every movement like he couldn't believe I was real. This uniform thing, I said, letting my fingers slide over his badge, is doing way too much. He smirked. You should see the handcuffs. I bit my lip, laughing quietly. Is that an offer? Don't tempt me. His hand dipped lower, and I exhaled hard. Every touch now felt more urgent. The slow burn had officially tipped into fire. In the stillness of the cruiser, in the dark stretch of highway where the world had all but vanished, we gave in. To the tension. To the questions. to whatever the hell this was turning into. And neither of us wanted to stop. We didn't say much after that, not because there was nothing to say, but because words didn't seem to fit. Not in that moment. Just the quiet breaths between us, the soft creak of the seat under shifting weight, the faint static from the police radio up front that neither of us had touched. Eventually, the heat between us settled into something quieter, not less intense, but more still. His hand stayed on my thigh, thumb brushing slow back and forth, grounding us in the quiet that followed. I was the first to speak. "So," I said, still half draped across his lap. "What now?" He leaned his head back against the seat, eyes closed, lips parted like he hadn't thought that far ahead. "That's a hell of a question." I slid back into my own seat slowly, legs stiff from the awkward position. My hoodie lay half folded on the floor by his boots. I picked it up and pulled it on again, suddenly aware of how late it was, and how exposed we were, even in the dark. "I didn't catch your name," I said, pulling the sleeves down. "Luke," he said after a second. "Officer Luke Harper, technically." "I'm Drew," I offered. He looked over at me like he already knew. "Yeah, I know," I blinked. "Wait, how?" He shifted, straightening his shirt but leaving the top buttons open. "I wasn't lying when I said I'd seen you. I asked the barista once, just said I was curious." My mouth opened a little, surprised and maybe a little flattered. "You really went and got my name from a coffee shop girl?" He laughed softly. "Yeah, pathetic, right?" "No, kinda sweet, actually." We both stared forward for a beat, like neither of us wanted to break the moment. But the weight of reality was creeping in. Luke ran a hand through his hair, the easy confidence from earlier slipping away again. "This can't happen again," he said, not looking at me. I swallowed. "Okay, it's not that I didn't want it. I did. But I'm a cop, and I pulled you over. If this got out..." "Yeah," I said quickly, "I get it." He looked at me again. "You don't seem pissed." "I'm not. I mean, I should be, maybe. But I wanted it too." His eyes searched mine, and whatever tension was still in his shoulders finally dropped. "I can't drop you off or anything," he said, reaching for the door. "But I'll follow you home, just to be sure you get back safe." I nodded. "Okay." We climbed out of the cruiser in silence. I walked back to my car, hands in my pockets, the air suddenly feeling different. Not cold, just quieter. Luke stood by the open door of his cruiser, watching me. "Drew," I turned. He hesitated, then said, "Thanks for not making it weird." I smiled faintly. "Little late for that." His mouth twitched. He nodded once and got into his car. I started my engine and pulled back onto the highway, headlights slicing through the dark. In my rearview mirror, I watched his patrol car follow behind me. Close, but not too close. No lights, no sirens. Just a quiet shadow, keeping watch. Somehow, that felt better than anything he could have said. I got home around 1:30 a.m., parked in the quiet lot behind my apartment, and sat in the car for a minute before getting out. Luke's cruiser paused at the far end of the street, idling for a few seconds like he was making sure I actually went inside, then slowly turned and disappeared down the block. I didn't sleep much, not because I was freaked out or regretful, just wired. The whole thing kept playing back in my head in slow motion, his hand on my thigh, that first kiss, the way he looked at me like I'd cracked something open in him, and then that careful distance afterward. I didn't blame him. Hell, I didn't even blame myself, but it still left me in this weird limbo between that meant something and pretend it didn't happen. The next morning, I woke up late, groggy, still wearing half of last night's clothes. My phone buzzed with a couple missed texts from friends I hadn't seen in a while. "You? Alive? Coffee later?" I stared at the screen, thumbs hovering. Then I put the phone down and headed for the shower. I wasn't ready to talk to anyone. Not yet. The next few days passed like that. I went to work, answered emails, tried not to replay every second in the back of that cruiser. Tried harder not to wonder if he was thinking about it too. Then Friday rolled around, and I saw him again. I was grabbing a coffee before work. Same cafe, same usual order. I was halfway through sipping it when I turned to head out, and there he was. Luke. Standing just inside the door. No uniform. Just jeans, a plain gray Henley, and a leather jacket that looked worn in all the right ways. He froze when he saw me. And for a second, we just stood there like two people who'd collided in the middle of a memory. Then he walked over, casual but slower than usual, like he didn't quite know what he'd say until he got there. "Hey," he said, his voice softer than before. "Hey," I echoed. He glanced down at my cup, then up at me. "Still a 2-sugar guy, huh?" "You remembered." Luke scratched the back of his neck, almost sheepish. "I remember a lot more than I should." There was a beat of silence. Then I asked, "You off duty?" "Yeah, got the morning off." "Coincidence?" He smiled. Not a full grin, but the kind that showed he didn't expect to get away with pretending. Not really. We moved to the corner table, sat down. He stirred a coffee he hadn't touched. I sipped mine just to keep my hands busy. "I've been thinking about that night," he said finally. "Yeah," I said. "Me too." He looked at me, and I could see it. He'd been wrestling with it. With the rules, the risks, the image he was supposed to maintain. And maybe with how easy it had been to want more. "I wasn't just acting on impulse," he said. "That wasn't some one-night thing for me." I let that sit for a second, then asked the only thing I really needed to know. "What do you want, Luke?" He swallowed, and for the first time, I saw real nerves behind that cop calm. "I want to see you again. Not as some weird, I pulled you over and we hooked up thing, just as you." I nodded slowly. "Okay." His brows lifted. "Okay. Yeah," I said, smirking a little. "But next time you want to talk to me, just walk up and say hi. No more traffic stops." Luke laughed, low and warm. "Deal." We sat there a little longer, sipping coffee, talking about nothing. But something in the air had shifted. It wasn't loaded or confusing anymore. It was simple, real. The way things feel when they're just beginning. The next couple weeks were a slow shift into something that felt almost normal. Almost. We didn't make a big deal out of what we were. There were no DTR talks, no dramatic confessions, just small things. Little changes, like how Luke would text me before his shifts, just a quick morning, or "Stay warm today," or how I'd start checking the corners of the cafe before ordering, hoping he'd show up in plain clothes, still smelling faintly of cologne and clean laundry. We weren't hiding, but we weren't public either. His world didn't exactly leave room for that, not yet. Still, we found pockets of time, late dinners at hole-in-the-wall diners outside town, walks through the park when the sun had just dipped below the skyline. The occasional hour on my couch, half a movie playing while we ended up tangled together, kissing like we were still in the back of that cruiser. He was softer in those moments, less guarded, still the cop, still composed, but with a kind of unspoken relief in his eyes. Like being with me let him step out of something he hadn't even realized was weighing him down. One night, I caught him watching me while I was washing dishes. Nothing romantic, just a Tuesday night, and I was drying a pan in the kitchen. But his look made me stop. "What?" I asked. He shook his head, leaned against the counter. "You just look like you're where you're supposed to be." I swallowed hard, heart tightening in the best way. "I don't always feel like that. But with you." He stepped closer. "Yeah, me too." Eventually, it got to the point where the cruiser didn't make me tense anymore. I saw it parked outside my place some nights. Luke off duty, swinging by after work. Sometimes he stayed. Sometimes he didn't. He never used the sirens. Then one night, out of nowhere, I got a knock on my door just after midnight. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, Luke was standing there. In uniform. I raised an eyebrow. "Is this part of the job, or are you just trying to relive our origin story?" He gave me a tired smile. Shift ended. I just didn't want to go home yet. I stepped aside. You hungry? He nodded. Yeah, for you. We both laughed. The moment cut through whatever heaviness he'd carried with him. Later, lying in bed with him, half asleep beside me, I ran my fingers along the fabric of his uniform shirt draped over the chair. It was weird how something that once symbolized rules and distance now felt like a thread connecting us. He stirred beside me, mumbled something I didn't quite catch. What? I asked softly. Still can't believe I pulled you over, he said, voice thick with sleep. Best illegal search of my life, I whispered, grinning. He chuckled, arms sliding around my waist, pulling me closer. I didn't file that report, by the way. Shame. Would have made a hell of a case study. He kissed the back of my neck. You're a case I'll never close. It was cheesy as hell. And I didn't care. Because sometimes, the best stories don't start in coffee shops or dating apps or on perfect days. Sometimes they start in the dark, on the side of a quiet road, with a risk. A look. A question. And a man who didn't know how to ask for what he wanted, until he did.